call to roll. Yeah.
I'll call the meeting to order. I'm Malcolm Webb.
Matt Flaherty.
Jeff McKim.
Vanessa,
McClary.
Alex Crowley, staff.
Audrey Del Rosa, staff.
Larry Allen, Legal Department.
And I would like to clarify that Dee is the new Assistant Director for Small Business Development in the Department of Economic and Sustainable Development, taking over for Jane Cooper-Smith.
Oh, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Started
Wow.
seconds ago, last Monday.
2 Mondays ago.
2 Mondays ago.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm a veteran at this
So
point.
she knows everything.
Fantastic.
Excellent.
Okay, very
So-
good.
So next on the agenda is the minutes, which I wanted to explain. We are going through, trying to do some cleanup on previous meetings and making sure that we have all the minutes in order. I think there are several meetings for which minutes will need to be approved, and we're doing a review of those, and we'll have them at the next meeting.
We'll postpone those
So
till the next meeting.
those should be forthcoming.
Very good. Do we have any old business to attend to at this meeting? Hearing none, I'll move to new business. We have resolution 22-04, and I'll turn it over to you, Alex, if you would present that.
Sure. If I can ask for Larry's help on this as well. And you should know that on the Zoom, we have some representatives of Ice Meller to help us as well. They have a presentation that they might be able to go through quickly, which I have queued up so that I can do the slide over here. But Larry, do you want to maybe start with kind of explaining the background of this? And
So yeah, we've done several of these economic development bonds for the renovation of affordable housing. You all saw this in December of last year for the initiating resolution where we kind of walked through this project. This is for Country View Apartments. This is run by Glick, and they're forming a Country View Housing LP limited partnership to essentially issue these economic development bonds with the city as a pass-through, so they'll be tax exempt in the amount of $15 million. This is a 206-unit apartment complex that will get fully renovated. This money is subject to a LIHTC grant that Country View Housing was awarded in July, I believe, and Chris can always keep me honest on that. These, of course, work as always. The city does not bear any liability for these. These stay with the project itself. And then it goes to keeping the affordability for the units, but mainly renovating them and doing significant renovations that are timely and needed. And then part of the LIHTC grant is that they maintain the affordability. This has been an affordable housing complex already. It's going to stay affordable for the life required, I think at least 30 years as required by the LIHTC. The process here, as you all know, is City Council has requested this as part of a public hearing today. So once we get done with the presentation, we'll open this up for the public hearing to take public comment on this officially. That was noticed properly in the paper ahead of time, the newspaper, the Herald Times. But the process here is that if you all recommend this, this will go to City Council for their final approval for the issuance of the bonds, and then there will be a closing, and those bonds will be issued through the City of Bloomington to Country View Housing LP for the renovations. And I will note, just as an ancillary kind of a side project, they've also asked for a pilot, which is a payment in lieu of taxes. That's something that has come back into Indiana code this year. It was available several years ago. We did one on the south side with kind of a retirement affordable unit complex. So in January 1st, 2022, the General Assembly reintroduced or made effective a new code to allow for pilots specifically for affordable housing. They've asked for that. While that's not subject to your approval tonight, we just want to make you aware of that in terms of what council's going to be talking about, what this project's going to entail. The benefit of the pilot is it essentially stabilizes, instead of paying the normal assessed value that might increase year to year, fixes that rate for a certain period of time and allows them to have certainty, but also plug extra money back into the project and do more renovations they would otherwise.
Thank you. Other presentation.
No, I mean, the only thing I would add, which
there's not a lot, which is the pilot's probably the much more substantial public kind of commitment to the units. It's still well within the parameters that we worked worked with in the past in terms of incentivizing the retention or creation of affordable housing units. And the bond we've done before in other contexts, and it's a pretty low impact, low risk way to help us, on these types of developments. So I can turn it over to the folks at Ice Miller and can run your slide presentation if you'd like. If you can see the screen, do you want me to do that?
Yeah, that works for us on our end. And it sounds like you do have the presentation before you there in the room as well. And really, this is just kind of our recommended path of how we think this conversation might be helpful to you. But if you have questions and want to steer it in a different direction, we're here to answer any questions you may have about the project. I am joined by Ryan Toll, who is the representative of Glick, the developer tonight. So Ryan can answer most of the questions regarding kind of the scope of the project and the type of renovations that are being planned at this point. And then I can kind of cover the approval process and some of the characteristics of these bonds as well. But like Larry mentioned earlier on in his introduction, we're using the same statute that was used for the Crestmont Community Project, and then also Reverend Butler and Walnut Woods a few months ago. So before you use a resolution to propose issuing economic development revenue notes under that same statute, which is Chapter 11.9 and 12 of 36-7. So I could probably kick it over to Ryan a little bit and talk about the scope of the project, and you guys can advance the PowerPoint kind of as you see fit. So.
Thanks, Chris, and I appreciate the team down in Bloomington having us today and considering this. So Country View Apartments is 206-unit apartment community, obviously located in Bloomington. We purchased this from CRF back in November of 21. Our nonprofit housing foundation bought it in order to maintain its affordability. So as part of that, going through and working through what I would call a extremely sizable renovation. So, from our standpoint, the housing foundations, their sole goal is to provide quality, affordable housing to those in need of it, right? And obviously, this project I think was built in 2 phases between 1970 and then 1975. If you've been by the project, it is a lot of brick, but if you go in the project, there's certainly needs at the project. So as we go through it, we're going to put in new HVAC systems, new cabinets, countertops, energy efficient appliances, new bathroom vanities, things like that. We'll do an ADA conversion of 4 units there, 100% replacement of windows on the site, gutters, downspouts, etc. Make sure the office, leasing center, those kind of things are ADA accessible. So this project will be 100% of the units at 60% AMI, going forward as we discussed. And, for us, this is a project that when you look at the economics, it just becomes very difficult to do without the tax credit process and the equity coming in, from the tax credit investor. But as we look at it, we have a presence in Bloomington. We really believe in affordable housing, and it just makes a lot of sense for us. From a structure standpoint, I'm happy to get into that if there's any real need for that. But even with the tax credits, there will be a sizable investment by our housing foundation because from a strictly a math standpoint, it's a heavy lift. This is one of the bigger renovations we've ever done. I expect it to creep north of $45,000 a unit by the time all is said and done. And for our purpose, it's the right thing to do, and it's the best thing for the community.
Ryan, I'm trying to track with your presentation, and I have no idea where you are in the PowerPoint, so I'm just.
Well, I was just kind of rolling through. I apologize. I mean, so for our purpose, I mean, if you go to, you know, the first 3 pages are strictly just pages on Glick, right? You know, and I'm happy to tell anybody about Glick that wants to know, but we are celebrating our 75th anniversary this year, so we've certainly been around for a while. Page 4, I can flip, we can just go that way if you want, just talks about Glick philanthropies, of which the Glick Housing Foundation, you know, is a part of. So just more updated information there. Page 5 gives you a little overview of Country View and its location. So if you're looking at the picture, to the right is Country View, to the left is Providence Place, which I believe is a senior facility right there, currently still owned by CRF, I believe. Page 6 just gives you kind of a breakdown of the units, right? And total square footage, whatnot. So 21 residential buildings with obviously a community building, leasing office, about 178,000 square feet. Next, page 7. And this just shows where it's situated within the community and, you know, some of the site amenities, healthcare, grocery, retail, within a mile of Country View. And then as you talk about project, or I talked about project scope, renovations, HVAC, kitchen, cabinet, that kind of thing, appliances, etc. You can go on to page 9. That's just a picture of the community room. But again, as we talked about, major CapEx, replacement of windows, those kind of things that obviously will help with the energy efficiency as well. Conversion of the leasing space to ADA compliant, and a dog park as another example. And again, these are very high level, you know, overview of what we're doing. But we work with CRG Residential, who's a Fishers-based contractor. They've done they've rehabbed every tax credit project that we've done to date, in addition to numerous market rate projects for us. But these are rapid rehabs, so the tenants traditionally move their stuff. So as an example, if you've got stuff in your kitchen, they move it from the kitchen to the living room, you know, and leave that morning, and then generally they're out of their unit for 2 nights, and then they would come back the 3rd day, and their unit has been rehabbed. So that, you know, we've obviously gone through some of the renovations, but you know, solid surface, countertops, new cabinets, that kind of thing. And then we also generally new flooring in the kitchens, baths, high traffic areas, that kind of thing. So it's certainly a quick rehab from a tenant standpoint. So obviously it reduces their time out of the units. I think, you know, you'll see many rehabs and many developers that take 10+ days. So the 88 units do take a little bit longer, but you know, we found very good success with this. And then this is
I can kind of pick up here, but just to kind of reiterate what Larry mentioned earlier, the city induced the project, you know, late last year, early this year, which allowed Glick to go to IHCDA and make an application for bond volume and the credits that were awarded for this particular project. So at this point in time, the resolution before you is a final approval of not to exceed $15 million of the economic development revenue notes that'll go towards financing through a Freddie Tell structure, the scope of work that Ryan mentioned a little bit earlier on. So in this development timeline, you know, we're somewhere near, you know, the phase 3, 4 kind of happening at the same time. And really just kicking off the final approvals with the EDC here. And then the next slide is meant to kind of reiterate, I think some of you have probably seen this exact slide with a different name at the bottom a couple times, but it's really meant to reiterate the conduit nature of these deals and the city's role in conduit bond issuances. So through the flow chart, the project's at the bottom, and as we mentioned, after the inducement resolution was awarded, IHCDA underwrote the project to ensure that it met IHCDA QAP requirements, and IHCDA awarded the necessary bond volume and also the tax credits for the project. And now the resolution before you is to you approve and consider the economic development revenue notes, which would be issued with the city as a conduit, and the purchase price or the sale of the bonds, the dollars flow to the project to finance the scope of work that Ryan discussed. And then on the top right, just shows the tax credit limited partner joining the partnership and purchasing essentially the tax credits in exchange for equity into the project that also are necessary dollars that go to the scope of work for the project. And then the next slide, again, is a little bit of a timeline. It's just kind of to reiterate the process, but really with the help of the city of Bloomington and staff and the whole working group, IHCDA has awarded its step 3 volume credits, and now we're kind of kicking off the step 4 with the city of Bloomington with respect to the issuance of these bonds. And perhaps the most important slide is the last slide, which is meant to reiterate that the bonds are not payable from city taxes. They're of no obligation. The city has no obligation to repay, debt service, principal and interest on the bonds, and they certainly do not affect the city's constitutional debt limit or bank qualified limit as well. So the city really is acting as a pure conduit here. The only thing securing the bonds are the revenues of the project. So, and then we're happy to open it up to any questions regarding the resolution or the statutory framework from which these bonds will be issued, or the need for a public hearing, or any scope of work related to the project as well. We're happy to answer any of those questions at this time.
Yeah.
I had a brief question about the scope of work with the renovation. Thank you, Ryan, for walking us through that. Did you mention that 4 units are being converted to be ADA compliant? Is that right? Along with the leasing office and some things? Okay. And how many total units are accessible then of the 206? Do you know roughly?
I apologize. Did you say how many total units will be accessible?
Yep.
So it'll be 4 units that are what I would consider truly accessible. If you've been out to the site, there's quite a bit of terrain challenges, is what I would say. Just kind of goes a little up and down. And so from our standpoint, there is one specific building that you can easily, I'll say, ramp up to, and then when you go in it, there's no stairs, there's no anything, they're flat, and we're putting the 4 units in there.
Okay, so we're going from 0 to 4 on the accessibility front. And you felt like that was the reasonable limit for what could be achieved with this renovation? Yeah,
I mean, there becomes a balance here of what can be done, within reason, right? If we spend, $45,000 a unit roughly to do a traditional unit, you're at least almost doubling that cost for most of the ADA units, because you are widening doors, different things like that. It's a pretty massive overhaul. And then when you get into some of the other challenges associated with how buildings are set, or stairs or anything else, it becomes challenging at best.
Got it. And just one last follow-up, which is, do you have any information or knowledge of the history of prospective tenants, and has this been a barrier for folks, and do you have a sense of that demand or how this might relate to it?
As it relates to ADA?
Yeah, how many, assuming folks are, turned down at this point if they need...
No, I'd be lying if I said I did. Obviously, we have not owned this project, less than a year, right? I can tell you historically, there's certainly a need for ADA units in all apartment communities. I would tell you that they're not as readily used as we would hope. And you end up, with lower countertops and different things like that, which certainly serve its purpose, but some people that end up moving into them may not have specific needs for those. They lose cabinet space and everything else. So we do feel like this is a fair number for this project. But no, I'm not aware of anybody being turned away because they haven't had them at this point.
Okay, thank you very much.
So first of all, I mean, we've done the same process a number of times. I certainly support it and don't really have any questions about the project per se or the process. I'm actually more interested in the pilot. And I know that's not actually what we're evaluating today, but I was wondering, how do you determine what amount is used for the pilot?
In a pilot?
Yeah.
So I'm pausing to answer in that, do we need to do something formal from a public meeting perspective before, or is this pre that?
Pre that. So
Okay.
after we're done with commissioner questions, we need to open up for public hearing,
Okay.
so any member of the public can ask the question.
So that's a good question, right? And it's, as you probably know, it's kind of wide open, right? So what we've tried to do, not only for this particular pilot, but for any instance where public money is put on the table to stimulate or retain affordable housing units, we've tried to come up with a kind of what's an appropriate range, right? And does a given set of incentives, in this case a pilot, on a per unit basis, normalizing it first on a per unit basis, right? So that you can kind of match dissimilar projects with each other. So on a per unit basis, what is the public investment and how does that compare with what other public investments have been for the similar outcome, right? So that's really, the key for us, so we can run the model out on a, the pilot, in this particular case, the pilot's a little complicated because we're guessing at what the non-exempt assessed value at some future date post-renovation is going to be. We've asked them, Glick, to provide that information for us, their best guess, and to sort of, provide it as a kind of certification of what that total value would be. So we have that from them. We know what the pilot is asking them to pay. So the math is what is effectively the theoretical public investment, right? And then we take that cumulative amount and net present value of that and then divide it by the unit count, and we see where that drops in that range. And that's sort of how we've come in. So if it was out of the range, if it was grossly outside of what has been an acceptable number, we would have reconsidered it, but it seems to fall well within that.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions of any of the members of the commission? Without seeing none, I'd like to open up questions to the general public if we have any present or online.
So there's no one here, but unless Katz would like to ask one. There are some people, I think, on Zoom, so we're opening this up on Zoom. If you would like to ask a question, please feel free to do so.
Typically, we ask them to use the raise the hand function or put in the chat your question so that we can recognize you and the host can unmute you potentially. So
Yeah, is there anything in the chat? Okay.
It's me.
That's an old chat. Doesn't look like there is anybody from the public.
Okay.
Okay. Hearing no questions from the public, I would entertain a motion. Chair will entertain a motion on the resolution.
Move approval of resolution 22-04.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the chair calls for a roll call vote on the motion.
Jeff McKim,
Yes.
Matt Flaherty,
Yes.
Vanessa McCleary?
Yes.
Tom Webb?
Yes.
Okay, it's 4-0, one absent.
Very good. The motion
Now concludes the
passes.
public hearing. Thank you.
Yes. No, that's fine. The motion passes. That's the conclusion of the public hearing, but before we leave, for the good of the order, any announcements or matters
Thank you
for the
to
process?
Vanessa for rushing in on 2 wheels to make the meeting and vote in time.
Very
Appreciate
good.
it.
No problem. I thought maybe I could make it. I always went Boston.
So the next meeting is scheduled for November 15th at 4 o'clock. Likely in this room again. We'll have a Zoom option for someone if they need to join remotely.
Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Any opposed? We are adjourned. Thank
If
you.
you all want to just go ahead and sign.